Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. I will start with a bit of webinar housekeeping. I think we've got more people due to join us over the next few minutes, but I'll get going with a bit of background. So you're all very welcome. My name's Anna and I'm from the TUC, and we'll welcome you today to a TUC London East and South East region webinar as part of the Our Work Matters campaign. Today's webinar is going to be about multilingual organising with outsourced workers. We've got two brilliant speakers who I will get them to introduce themselves in a minute. We've got Kim and Hilda. Hilda is from the GMB and Kim is from PCS, but I'll get them to talk a little bit more about themselves in a minute. Just a bit of webinar housekeeping. We are recording today's session, so if you miss anything or you've got to leave early, please don't worry, because the recording will be made available to you over the next week or two, because we'll send you a link to it. We do have a chat open, so do share tips and ideas in the chat. If something that one of our speakers says you've got experience of, do talk about it, because we love hearing about what's going on in workplaces. And we have saved some time to take some questions from you, the viewers, after we've heard from Hilda and from Kim. So do keep a note of anything you want to ask them. I'm aware that people are still joining us, but I'm going to ask Kim and Hilda to introduce themselves first before we hear from Hilda specifically about her experiences in this area. Before we do that, I will just talk a little bit about the background to this. So as I said, it's part of the Our Work Matters campaign, and which is all about the outsourcing of workers, and why we want to build an insourcing campaign, especially in public services, when workers are outsourced to external providers. And often the outsourcing is accompanied by a deterioration in pay, terms and conditions, etc. So we found that outsourced workers are disproportionately women and black workers, and they might also often be migrant workers where English isn't their first language. So the challenge of communicating in the workplace can be really difficult for reps and for organisers. So what we're going to hear about today is some tips and some best practice from Kim and Hilda about how they've been able to identify some of the challenges that these types of workplaces present, and how they've overcome some of these barriers in order to effectively organise in the workplace. So now there's lots more of us here. Hilda, would you like to introduce yourself first? Tell us a bit about your background, then Kim, and then we'll hand over back to you, Hilda, to talk us through your experience.
Of course, yes. Hello, everyone, and welcome on today's webinar. I am Hilda Tabolara, a retired regional organizer and equality officer from the GMB Trade Union, London region, after almost 33 years of service. My first language is Spanish, followed by English and Italian, and it really helped and collaborate a lot during all those years, organizing. One of where my specialization was organizing outsourcing workers in the NHS organizations, contractors, local government, and obviously I also organize around equalities. So that's more or less about a little bio about me. Thank you.
Thanks, Hilda. That's great. Kim?
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Hilda. My name's Kim Hendry. I work for PCS, and I've worked for PCS for about 20 years, just over. Most of that time I've been an industrial officer for that whole time. Most of that time I've been a negotiator, and although I have done some organising, and clearly we organise around issues, so the two go hand in hand anyway. I've also headed up PCS Learning for a few years. For the last couple of years, I've been the strategic organiser and the main organiser for outsourced FM workers, facilities management workers, across the civil service and public sector areas that PCS organises in, and much of that has included, like Hilda, organising, representing workers who don't speak English as a first language, often in the cleaning sector, but in other areas too. So that's what I'll be talking about, some of my experiences.
Thanks, Kim. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about the work you've both been doing as well. So, Hilda, you're going to go first.
Okay.
Let's hear
Okay.
about some of the work you've been doing in the GMB.
Okay, thank you so much. Firstly, I will be guiding you through how workers can effectively collaborate, communicate, and stay aligned when language and geography create barriers, and to equip you all with strategies and principles for organizing workers who are outsourced, migrant, multilingual. In this session, we will look at practical ways to organize the workforce across multiple languages, use translation and communication tools effectively, set clear expectations with outsourced workers, and foster inclusion and trust in multilingual workplaces. First of all, we are going to look at building power with outsourced and migrant workers. Today, many workplaces rely on outsourced labor, cleaning, logistics, IT, food services, often filled by migrant workers in a variety of industries, such as the NHS, and local government. As we all know, the outsourcing of service principally is a cost-saving measure to the detriment of vital workers who deserve to be treated fairly by their employer. These workers face double barriers, outsourcing and language differences. So knowing where these migrant workers are based is very important. Their job roles, which languages they speak, what language needs they have, what barriers to learning they may face, what workplace issues they are experiencing, and how they feel about trade unions. Unions can organize across this divide with solidarity, creativity, and respect. Trade union members become in control and set the agenda collectively, speaking with one voice, and the language of unionism is solidarity. GMB, the union I represent, provides an organizing strategy called GMB at Work, which is built on campaigning, communications, and credibility. So now, the second part of this is about understanding the challenges. Identify and understand the key barriers which will help us plan smarter organizing strategies. We have three different barriers. The first one is structural. Outsourcing fragments the workforce and hides employers behind contractors. Workers may not even know who their real employer is. Cultural and linguistic is another barrier. Language gaps create isolation and distrust. Language and cultural barriers isolate migrant workers. They may feel excluded from union activity. And that third and very important is about do I have rights, which what I'm trying to talk is about the legal barriers, different contracts, unclear rights, precarious status, which discourage activism. Is a legal precarity that adds to the pressure of them. Short or 0-hour contracts, visa dependency, or unclear rights, that actually discourage them to get involved. So now we know the barriers, and now we are going to go on to how we start building the trust and relationship for effective organizing. So it's about what I'm trying to for you to grasp this morning is there is different parts about that. It's about listening, identify potential reps, and translate and visualize. So we start with building the strengths and solidarity in the workplace. As we know, migrant workers with lower levels of English are often among the lowest paid, most precariously employed people in a workplace. Involving and organizing our lowest paid members, it will be our key priority. So when they organize around a common problem or inequality in the workplace, they take control and increase their confidence and language skills to enable assertiveness, greater activism, and power in the workplace. This could mean greater participation in branch meetings, in forums, more members voicing opinions and suggesting ideas, more involvement in local campaigns, and greater diversity in members stepping forward to become active members, to become workplace organizers, as we call them, representatives, shop stewards. When we talk to workers, it provides a great opportunity to share information about the role of trade unions, to increase awareness of employment rights and encourage involvement in the union in general. There may be a negative perception of trade unions among some migrant workers arising from personal experience in their country of origin. So this is an opportunity to stress the union's independence from employers, the government, and business interests. So where do we see where we meet our workers, where they are in canteens, housing, transport routes? No, we have to listen before recruiting. They need to know that we understand their daily struggles. At the same time, we start identifying peer connectors or worker leaders who speak the same language. In one word, potential workplace representatives. They will actually be a great help in order to uh, build that trust. Uh, and then we go on to the translation of materials, use of visuals, posters, and of course, membership forms when the connection has been made responding to a need in the workplace. What we also have to bear in mind is about always use inclusive communication, explain multilingual organizing tactics, speak every language of solidarity, use multilingual meetings with interpretation or breakout groups, encourage and empower bilingual leaders to co-facilitate, these people who will become the reps in the workplace, provide union materials in workers' languages, flyers, leaflets about their rights, terms and conditions. And most importantly, it's about respecting the cultural diversity. Organizing looks very different in different countries, in different communities. And always bear in mind that most of the time, migrant workers suffer race discrimination. And equality is always at the heart of what trade unions do. It is not an optional value, it is the moral and practical foundation of collective organizing. And this is going on to collective action and union integration. So now is turning the communication into power. Once the trust is built, connect and unite outsourced workers with directly employed ones. Push for collective demands, wages, better terms and conditions, health and safety, respect, mental health, equality, not separate struggles, and campaign for equal treatment clauses in contracts. When I was organizing in NHS organizations, I remember the time I used to utilize it was when they were close to the canteen, where not only NHS directly employed workers were there and also the contractors, but I was building that solidarity so they could understand what their peers, not directly employed by the NHS, was actually going through and struggling. So then, in that way, that's my point about integrating migrant workers into the whole of the organization and also into union structures, by actually bringing them onto branch committees, as I said before, delegate systems, representatives training in order to reach an educational development of these people that actually is going to help us organizers. Finally, obviously, language differences are real. but solidarity has no language barriers. So it's about inspire the action to work collectively. So always start small, one conversation, one translated leaflet, one new relationship. When we organize in multiple language, we don't just build unions, we build communities, start where workers are and bring them into solidarity. Finally, unions. Unions work through solidarity, people standing together to defend shared interests. If workers are treated less favorably because of gender, race, nationality, language, disability, or job type, that solidarity breaks down. So promoting equality isn't just ethical, it's strategic. It ensures everyone is empowered to participate fully, strengthening the union's voice, negotiating power. Equal voice for outsourced or migrant workers. That's what we want. Equality is not a side issue, it's the union's mission. Without equality, there can be no solidarity. Without solidarity, there can be no collective power. So I have given you a little bit of the background, and now I am going to start talking about a case study quite recently, one of my colleagues in the GMB. He has a good success. Constantly we have been working within the NHS establishments with contractors trying to bring to that more or less to the same pay terms and conditions. And I'm very happy. This case only has happened in the last year or so. And all my time as well, I was working in those different, and it's really, it gives us so much pleasure that actually we are doing so much for these members, outsourced NH members, that actually to be treated with fairly as their peers that are actually work directly employed for the NHS. So I'm going to talk about a workplace in particular is the Northwick Park London Northwest Healthcare NHS Trust Medires. They outsource NHS employers is the Medires, and the members' roles include cleaning, portering, catering, and security. The key language groups are Nepalese, and as well as Romanian, and there's others, but that's the main ones. Vast majority of members are ESO, several hundred of members of staff across the three sites, Northwick Park, Ealing, and Central Middlesex. Around a third of the staff members are on NHS Agenda for Change terms, having to pay over. The remainder on significantly less favorable are on Medires contracts. The campaign, it was the recognition for Northwick Park signed at the end of 22 after a protracted campaign. Following this, the union submitted a claim to equalize terms between Medires and Agenda for Change contracts. For example, bring all members up to NHS terms for sick pay and annual leave. We also submitted a collective claim for all members to receive the non-consolidated bonus of 1,200 to 1,600 that was made available to all NHS staff. Subsequently, this was extended to dynamically link Agenda for Change contracts, but this will not include the majority of NHS staff. As the agreement was not reached on either side, and after very, very lengthy negotiations, we entered into industrial dispute and took industrial action at Northwick Park in the summer of 2024. After 5 non-consecutive days of strike action, we agreed a settlement that paid all members of the staff the non-consolidated bonus, brought all members to London living wage, made improvements to the sick pay and annual leave offer, and spread recognition to all three sides in the trust. So that was really a good win. But how we did it, how we overcame the language barriers. So we discovered fairly quickly that trying to translate leaflets was not a silver bullet. Many of the negotiations were very complex, tripartite discussions between the union, the rest, and the trust, and progressing too fast for translating materials to be practical. So instead, we focus on three things. First, ensuring we have reps in place that cover all main languages spoken as well as all workplaces. A lead in each workplace for Nepalese and Romanians. These reps, once briefed, could disseminate messages effectively. Secondly, we arrange regular in-person meetings with members to update them. After the regional organizer and branch secretary have spoken, we will follow up with a translated version for the main language groups in real time. Thirdly, we used a WhatsApp broadcast for quick updates, as well as supporting consultative ballots, turnout for ballots, key messages were followed up with translations. So that was a case that it was quite lately, well, in the last 2 years. Another case that I would like to mention that I was one of the leading this case. It was about the Luton and Dunstable hospitals, part of Bedfordshire NHS Trust, outsourced cleaners that want the same pay as their NHS college after many months of long fight for justice. At that time, there was a change of contractor after a degradation of pay and terms and conditions and exploitation in the form of unfair treatment. So we were having a new contract to begin, cleaning, catering, and housekeeping. So the workers were, many of them paid a minimum wage. So what we achieved was for them to enjoy the full NHS pay as well as any nationally agreed future rises. Staff also, as I said, they want an improved annual leave and sick pay entitlements. Therefore, when the trust choose their private firm to run their contract in the future, all workers were guaranteed NHS pay rates. I have to say, it was a great result for the members at Luton and Dunstable Hospital. And most importantly, it was the recognition that our members deserve for the role they play for the patients day by day. And obviously, even during the pandemic, it was hard times for all of them, and ensuring that hospital is clean and patients are provided with meals. It was quite a year of collective action and hard campaigning, but the most important thing is finally the trust, the employer finally listened to our members. And as I said before, this settlement guarantees agenda for change for all the staff transferring to a new contractor. And the most important thing is, as a result of this work in organizing in multiple languages, is that our members feel they are now recognized with dignity and respect as all their other colleagues. For example, if we are talking about NHS colleagues, it was a huge step forward for our members. And all I can say is that we can organize. It's not impossible to organize around multilingual languages and with outsourced staff. So thank you very much for listening. And I think my colleague Kim will come over to us.
Thank you, Hilda. I'm just trying to move my IT's crashed because I was trying to move it from my, let me just refresh it again, just because I've got my notes online. So that's what I was looking at. There we go. So I'm going to slightly look away at for a few moments, just because my notes are on my other screen, on my other monitor. So I think Hilda's covered a lot, and I pretty much agree with everything that's been said and the comments made, both in terms of the context, but also in terms of the practical steps that we use to organise workers in these areas and more generally. I just wanted to start with a few, before I go into my experiences in PCS, I wanted to make a few sort of specific comments, one to set the scene, and also just to pick up on a few points that Hilda said. I think, first of all, just to preface this, and Hilda's talked a bit about, you know, the context in which we organise. And I would just sort of reinforce that. I think this is a very practical webinar about organising a particular group of workers with particular characteristics that we need to take account of when we organise. But I think it's very important if a union is going to be successful and most effective, is really integrating this as part of, you know, a broader industrial and organising strategy for these particular sectors. So in other words, thinking through, you know, planning, you know, organising approaches, thinking at identifying and in effect mapping the workplace in terms of where are we likely to encounter, because it is facilities management we're talking about, but obviously facilities management is not the only sector of the economy where there are non-English speakers or workers who, you know, who've come from other countries and therefore don't speak English as a first language. So I would say that it's something that we need to think about as part of that broader organising and industrial strategy, and then think about how we can best reach all sectors of that workforce. Obviously, resources have to be taken into account, but those resources, as Hilda said, it's really important to make sure that we organise and unionise the entire workforce, and the only way to do that is to acknowledge and understand and be respectful of the fact that some of our members will not speak English fluently. I think also the other thing to mention is we're politically, you know, we are in a country now where the far right is on the increase, and most of that language and most of the tropes and the narratives around that are about attacking migrant workers and seeing them as a problem. So I think also we need to understand this politically and link this to campaigning and equality, and how we as trade unions seek to unite workers and create solidarity across all working class people. So that's also really important context within which we're talking. The second thing I wanted to say is, I mean, Hilda spoke a little bit about how she got active, and I think probably in an ideal world we would have workers who work for the union who are themselves are able to speak those languages, rather than say, as I'm going to give you examples of, use interpreters, whether human being interpreters or AI assisted interpretation, because it does make communication so much easier. But where that's not possible, obviously there are workarounds that can be used. A couple of points just to pick up, and then I'll go into my case studies, if you like, is this point about workplace leaders. You know, we talk about a lot in organising about, you know, who is respected by the workforce, who is somebody that the workforce can, you know, who can influence a particular group of workers, and identifying who they are. And the experiences Hilda's talked about have worked very well. We haven't had that in some of the areas that we've been organising in PCS, where we've had to have more direct engagement with the full-time officer. But also I think one of the things that I would just be quite careful about is, because this happened sort of in the last couple of years, is there was one particular English speaker amongst this group of workers who I needed to contact, and he was great. He facilitated that engagement. He helped translate, but actually things have moved on in the last sort of 12 months, 6 months or so, and he's not really a workplace leader in the same way. So I think, you know, sometimes we also need to be cautious as well about whether a particular person is a genuine workplace leader, or whether it's because they have the English skills. So for me, that's also something I think we need to think carefully about in terms of sort of long-term building and developing lay leadership in the workforce. The other thing Hilda mentioned I want to just pick up on briefly is about integrating into the branch, which again is really important in PCS, in our facilities management areas, which are all outsourced, like most of the UK sector. You know, it's about solidarity and building solidarity with the lay reps in the civil service or the public sector areas. It's about providing support in individual representation, because we try not to say personal cases, because most individual representation has got roots in collective issues, which really then need to be collectivized. And it's also about increasing industrial power, because there is, you know, when, you know, security can shut down buildings, cleaning can shut down buildings, you know. I used to represent Met Police workers, and at one point we were talking, when we were trying to unionize the cleaners there, we were talking about shutting down all the custody suites in London. You know, if you remove all the cleaners from the custody suites, certainly at that time, you would not have been able to arrest people. There would have had to be some kind of provisions in place. So FM workers do have a lot of power if they withdraw their labour effectively. And we just had a major national dispute in Whitehall and across central London, where we secured major improvements for all the members, secured major improvements for themselves, and showed their industrial power. But it's also about looking at the potential for workers in those outsourced areas, you know, looking to coordinate industrial action and industrial disputes with their directly employed colleagues. And there's a very interesting case study from Organising for Power and Jane McAlevey and the Rosa Luxemburg, you know, trainers in Berlin, where their hospital actually brought out workers in a big dispute, which they won, both the outsourced workers and the nurses and the other insourced or direct employees. So again, it's about that industrial power and using and maximizing our leverage as well. So those are also important points. In terms of our experiences and my experiences recently in PCS, I want to focus on two case studies, for want of a better expression, which are in the outsourced Whitehall areas. So the particular group, the first example where we had a big win was ISS, and that is in Cabinet Office and other sites. And basically it was a big TUPE transfer back in November 2023 and October 2023, where Mighty and other outsourced contractors lost the contract. It was reconfigured, and it's now the Cabinet Office Government Property Agency run the contract on geographical lines. So we're talking about security, catering, cleaning, logistics, reprographics, all those soft FM and hard FM, you know, like plumbers, engineers, and handymen, all those basic building services. So the area where we had a big dispute in 23 and 24 was the ISS soft facilities management, and it was the cleaners and the caterers. And during the TUPE transfer, the new provider, ISS, had given notice that they wanted to change the pay date for the pay frequency date from monthly to fortnightly. And the workers were very upset about that, because that was going to have a major impact on low pay workers. That was going to have a major impact on their ability to pay their bills, for obvious reasons, because all bills are monthly. So we did a lot of work and campaigning around that, which I'm not really going to go into. Just very briefly mention, we used, you know, parliamentary campaigning. We used Megaphone, the TUC Megaphone petition. We did a survey of the members to gain qualitative data about the impact it was going to have, to show that it was an issue that a majority felt very strongly about. And we obviously raised it during the TUPE talks. We were not able during the TUPE talks because we didn't have full recognition until towards the end of those TUPE talks. It was quite a complex situation, but we won recognition towards the end. So we weren't able to stop that change. So ISS implemented it. Then what happened is we then ran a campaign, both internally through the collective grievance processes, but also by lodging tribunal claims. And that galvanized people. People signed, you know, members and some non-members signed working under protest letters. So we were then able to go and take legal claims, and we also pursued a collective grievance internally. And the workers who were most affected, half of them were in the cleaning department, and the majority of them did not speak fluent English. So during that period, and probably really for the first time in my experience, although I've organised and represented as a negotiator outsourced workers, you know, for several years in previous roles, this was the first time I'd ever been involved in sustained organising, on the ground organising those members and having to communicate and needing to communicate with them. And so that's, you know, learned quite a lot of lessons from that. So a few things that I learned, I would say the key things were, first of all, obviously communication. We used workers in the workforce who'd actually been to be transferred to a different employer, security guards, but they had close relationships because they all worked in the same workplace. So the initial interpreters that we used to do members' meetings in the workplace were actually, you know, fellow workers and security guards. So that was important. Obviously, translating everything. Okay, thank you. We'll respond to chat after we finish. So that was the first thing. We also made sure that we translated everything written as well. So we did working under protest letters. So people said that they were, you know, refusing to accept the change to their contractual entitlement to be paid monthly. And obviously we got that translated into Portuguese, Spanish and Lithuanian, which were the three languages that the cleaners spoke. The caterers all spoke English, but the half of the people affected, like I said, were in the cleaning team. So we got that translated. And then it was also really important to just do the normal organising. So in terms of decision making, making sure that members understood what was going on and making sure that they can make informed decisions at each step of the way. So inevitably then we needed to make sure we carried on organising. So what I found most effective, it's been a mixture of things. It's been using interpreters in face-to-face meetings. It's been setting up a WhatsApp group and then posting short, simple messages in all the relevant languages. So you do it in English first, then the other languages, using AI-assisted technology. And then also translating documents using professional translators or community translators to ensure that people understood what they were signing or documents that they needed to sign. So that was how we engaged with those members. It was a long dispute. We won most of in terms of the collective grievance. That was heard in the spring last year, and management upheld the requested change back to monthly pay. So as we understand it, that ISS had to change their policy for everybody, not just that particular group of workers. And so most of the members then chose to go back to monthly pay at that point, which was the key demand. But there were other elements of it as well. So we then pursued it through an appeal, and then we also settled out of court. So obviously I can't talk about that. With ISS in the autumn, an out of court settlement to settle all claims, and that was quite a long-standing process. But it meant that the members were fully involved, and it showed them the power of, you know, through collective action, that they were able to participate. And it's the first time that I've been aware of that members have really been, you know, at the heart of a key campaign, you know, which we've won, certainly in the last sort of 10 years or so, where English hasn't been the main language for a significant proportion of them. So that's the first experience of where we're organising multiple languages. One of the things I would say is that, and I'll come on to this at the end, is about using interpreters and using community interpreters as opposed to maybe using professional interpreters. And I've got a few thoughts on that, and I'll come back to that, because at different points, I've started to use professional translators recently during some of the hearings we've been doing, whereas previously we were either using workplace interpreters or what you might call community interpreters from a charity that we work with, a migrant workers charity that tutors English as a foreign language, for speakers of other languages, ESOL. So the second example I want to give is an example that came up this year, and it's for a similar group of workers, and it's another collective grievance, but this collective grievance was all around bullying issues, bullying and just favoritism in the workplace. So it's been, in my experience as the main organizer and representative of that group of workers, who none of whom speak fluent English, most of whom don't speak much English at all, in a cleaning team again, it has been more challenging, because when we were talking about a campaign to change a policy, when the members were communicating how they felt about that, when we were in the collective grievance, because all the members attended that collective grievance last year, and we had interpreters at that collective grievance that the employer paid for, then we were talking about policy changes. So in terms of how they felt in what you might call more subjective experiences, they were talking about the impact of that policy from monthly pay to fortnightly pay and how that had impacted them. This time around, it's more complicated, because it is about a pattern of behaviour by more than one team leader and manager over the period of well over a year, and it covers multiple incidents, it covers perceptions, it covers specific incidents. So trying to pull together all of that information and translate it both literally in terms of languages, but also translate it into something which meets the kind of the employer's definition of you know, the grievance process in terms of what's likely to be upheld as a complaint, and then the outcomes that are going to be sought, has been quite challenging. And I have had to use a lot more interpreters during that period, and different types of interpretation. And I think it just goes back to some of the points that Hilda was saying about, if I'd been able to communicate directly in, say, Spanish, because Portuguese speakers will understand Spanish, that would have made it easier, because I would have had more of a direct connection to sort of assess and understand what the members were telling me, and what the sort of contact we've had was telling me, and to kind of assess what people were saying when it's about perceptions. You know, this manager said this was unfair. Well, why was it unfair? Because some incidents are very clearly cross a line, discriminating language or unfair behaviour, but some about it, and we know this from a lot of bullying, it's the impact it has in that workplace. So it's about understanding the tone of voice, why, you know, the perception, was it sarcastic, the cumulative impact of all that pattern of behaviour. And that's become, you know, we're managing it, and we are communicating, but it has been a challenge. So what I wanted just to sort of talk about briefly was some of the ways in which you know, that we've used to communicate with those members, and to make sure that they're involved every step of the way, and that they still are involved in the decision-making process. So the WhatsApp group is crucial. When I post, I was going to try and do a dummy mock-up to give an example. I haven't had time, so apologies. But what I do is, when I post a message, I'll post it in English. Then what I'll do is I will post it in Spanish and Portuguese and Lithuanian. I use AI assisted technology, and if anybody wants the link, there are multiple links out there which probably you're all using, but if you don't know, we can share links afterwards with people. AI is very good nowadays, and I haven't got time to go into it, but I've tested it a lot when we've done written translations, and as long as you use, I would say the key thing is to use short sentences. Do not try and put lots of different information or thoughts into a single sentence. Keep it short, keep it simple, use standard English, not like sort of colloquial language, or yeah, we'll do that, but try and keep it as standard as if you were writing for, you know, a web story or something. Keep it short, maybe 1 or 2 facts per sentence. Do not use colloquial language or sayings like pick your battles, or which I use a lot, or you know, obviously my mind's gone blank now. I was going to come up with some examples, but there's what I realized is I use sayings a lot as a kind of a metaphor for trying that we, you know, is that we all use a lot in our language to easily and quickly communicate something more complex or detailed. And of course you can't do that because it doesn't easily translate or even translate at all into another language. So it's about keeping it really clear, simple, short sentences, and then that's much more likely to translate accurately into that other language if you're going to use AI, but even as well if you're communicating via an interpreter. In terms of interpreting, like I said, there's been 3 different lots of interpreters because we haven't really had members in the workplace who can interpret, certainly for this current grievance, to the level that we require. So we have had to use external people. I've used a number of security guards who work in the same workplace. I've also used community translators, like I said, and more recently for the formal hearings with the employer, the decision maker around the collective grievance, I've been using professional interpreters who are fairly expensive. So obviously we have to be careful. But what I find is that they are good for you know, in terms of what you might call more consecutive translation. So often what you'll get a translation and somebody will then summarize for 3 or 4 minutes. So you don't get a chance to really understand and relate what the person's saying to you to then what you then get translated into English. And just for direct communication, that can be helpful. Obviously for the actual formal hearings, the employer pays. That's important for obvious reasons. But what's happened is recently there have been some issues, which I'm going to finish on. And I just finished quickly on that point about some of the challenges we've had. So in that sense, professional interpreters can be very good. But I think going back again to Hilda's point, nothing really substitutes from having people who speak at least one of the main languages who can go into that workplace and communicate directly. That can be really important, but there are workarounds. The final point I wanted to end on is really about that issue of the employer paying and some of those discrimination, indirect discrimination issues. And one of the things that we're doing at the moment in PCS is as a direct result of our experiences the last few months in particular, is getting legal advice about whether the way in which workers are treated by their employer when they don't speak English as a first language or fluently amounts to indirect race discrimination. So again, not got a chance to go into it, but I can speak more when we have questions. But the protected group, well, the protected characteristic would be migrant workers / people who are not British born and speak English fluently. So it could be white East European people because they don't speak English as a first language, and the comparator would obviously be English speaking colleagues who speak English as a first language. What we've found increasingly is that there are so many ways in which our members are disadvantaged, not by direct racism necessarily of management or HR. It's more about the policies are not set up to ensure that everything is not translated for them. They're often required and get very anxious about sometimes signing documents that they do not understand because it's not been translated. You know, it might be a health and safety document or confidentiality that's come up recently, but they don't actually know what they're signing and they're expected to sign it. So there are operational reasons too where it's not in the employer's interest. So there is a whole myriad of ways in which our members who don't speak fluent English are excluded and not fully included in the workplace, and you know, we would argue potentially that's indirect race discrimination. So I think I need to end there because I've gone over a bit, Anna, so apologies. But those are some of the experiences that we're finding and the challenges. And ultimately, and final point is, I think this all is rooted in the model of outsourcing, to really start where Hilda, to finish where Hilda started. The nature of outsourcing itself is discriminatory. You know, UVW have in the past won an ET, which is now being appealed because it wasn't upheld on appeal. But, you know, that outsourcing is indirect race discrimination. And I think this is just another aspect of that. And again, reinforces why this needs to link to the industrial policy around campaigning for insourcing. So I'll leave it in there. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Hilda.
Thank you so much, Hilda and then Kim, for your really insightful and also, I think, very practical suggestions. You were talking about experiences of campaigning in the workplace on these issues, but at the same time giving the audience some suggestions, tips, best practice, I think that we can all learn from. We've got a bit of time left for questions. So if anyone wants to comment or ask Kim or Hilda, can you put your electronic hand up and we'll hopefully get round to as many of you as we can. Alex.
I think that's unmuted now, is it?
That's great. Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, thanks to Hilda and Kim. I just wanted to raise the issue about insourcing, because we're talking here, I mean, both of you were talking mainly about outsourced workers. And that's, and I, by the way, I'm an RMT lay official, and I'm very familiar with the scenarios that you both painted, organising soft facilities management workers, outsourced workers working for ISS, Mighty, various other familiar companies. But I think one of the things that I've found when talking to them and giving them some perspective on what can be achieved and why it's important to be a union member and to get organised, and beyond simply achieving effectively the London living wage, which is what has turned into a ceiling, a pay ceiling in many cases for outsourced workers rather than a floor, which it was intended to be, is the perspective that we can get them insourced. And I mean, that was the ephemeral promise that was held out by Starmer before the election, that a Labour government was going to bring the biggest wave of insourcing in a generation, which isn't saying very much because there's never been a wave of insourcing before. But we haven't seen any substantial insourcing. There have been some successful cases which have been fought for by unions often, particularly in the higher education sector, I think. And I'm just wondering whether, and so what we've tried to do is to make the demand for insourcing kind of a core part of the organising drive for cleaners and other outsourced staff in the rail industry in particular. And I just wondered whether you thought that was something that the trade union movement broadly and generally should do and does do enough of, and whether that how that affects organising. Thanks.
Kim and Hilda, would one of you want to come back first, or Kim, go for it?
I totally agree, which is why I finished on the point about outsourcing, because it is absolutely essential to integrate it, and started by saying, we need to look at it in the context of the industrial, objective. So looking at the time, I just say very simply that PCS policy absolutely is about insourcing, and it's a key part of our organising strategy. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, go for it, Hilda.
Yeah, I agree completely with you, Alex, completely with Kim, and it's the same. The GMB trade union, we are working very, very hard in trying to have insourcing back. We have so many years since, about with outsourcing, the CTT compulsory tendering as well, competitive compulsory tendering. That all comes from the Thatcher government's, and it has really have been so detrimental for our workers and members. So as I said, the same with PCS, the GMB is trying tirelessly to actually try to campaign for insourcing our members in everything, in all of NHS, trust, or local government, or different organizations. So completely agree with you, Alex. And I think we really need to unite all trade unions, try to campaign against outsourcing. So thank you.
Thank you, Hilda. Did anyone else have a question for our speakers, or just even if it's not a question, some thoughts, want to share your experiences? Lee?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for putting this webinar on. Hilda and to Kim, I'm just going to make some notes just before I speak. I also am a member of the RMT. So regarding Hilda, first of all, thank you very much. I am currently trying to recruit outsourced workers, and you've given me quite a bit to go on. So thank you very much for that input. Kim, the issue that I do believe Alex has touched on is simply one of, you use the equation of, well, no, actually it was Hilda who used the equation of there is no solidarity without equality, and without that solidarity we cannot achieve collective power. And in that, you use the term, Kim, of discrimination in terms of outsourced workers, and it is just to say thank you very much for bringing that to the fore, because without that we need to understand that it is used as a division tactic, and as a trade union movement we have to bring all outsourced workers in. So yeah, thank you both very much, ladies.
Thank you, Lee. Did you want to come back on any of those points, Kim and Hilda?
I'm happy just to see if anybody else has got any comments or questions, given the time.
Oh, is that Carol? Is that, you got your hand up? Yep. So Carol, yeah, that.
Yes, I'm not muted. Yeah. Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm a founding member of East London Unite community, and we have lots of availability during the day to be able to go to picket lines and to support workers, and have been involved in some really excellent things. For example, around the Barts Trust, cleaners, porters and catering staff, outsourcing and getting them brought back into house. But I think one of the things that concerns me is that the government departments particularly are able to so easily just outsource everything, which actually, if they're trying to save money, costs an awful lot more. And I think the unions need to be making those sorts of points, that it's costing more to outsource, to bring in these private companies. And that's one of the things that's caused so much difficulty within the NHS. I did the People's March for the NHS in 2014. And our message right from Jarrow in Newcastle down to London was about the privatisation and the chip, drip, drip of the privatising of our NHS. And, you know, Wes Streeting is not someone who champions the NHS in the right way. He will outsource and privatise every little bit that he can and profit from it, I'm afraid. But I think what we need to do is make sure that services stay in-house, that people have proper contracts, and get rid of 0-hour contracts. You know, people are exhausted because they're actually trying to do 2 or 3 different jobs in order to make a living income. And they're existing, they're not living, they're surviving. And very often it is migrant workers, or it is workers from different communities and with different languages who are at the bottom of the pile. And one of the other groups that are at the bottom of the pile often are, and very isolated, are deaf people. And they're often, you know, doing cleaning jobs. And I remember a deaf man recently saying to me, I've always done menial tasks. And I had to say, actually, it's not menial. You know, if things aren't cleaned, if you aren't doing the little bits that you do, the whole lot of the machinery falls apart, and you are a cog in a wheel along with other cogs. And I was trying to persuade him to join a union, and also to try and get extra hours because he struggles on universal credit and making up money and so on, and it's really affecting his mental health now. So I just think in order to have a fully inclusive workforce, you do need to find out if you have any deaf or partially hearing colleagues and members, and make sure that they are asked, what do you need to be involved in a meeting? I mean, Kim, you've just talked about translations and inclusion and so on, and I think it is many can read if they've gone to a deaf school or school for the deaf and grown up in that. They would be able to read, but some don't have the grammar because BSL is a different grammar structure from English, and a lot of people don't realise that either. So when I want to say, what's your name? I don't say, what's your name? I say, name what? There's a different grammar and structure, and culturally that makes people more isolated if they don't grasp the sentences that you're using. So it's just about, you know, having some deaf awareness and things like that, having a deaf awareness session where any members can come along, and the deaf members will see then that they are included and feel included, as well as those who speak other community languages. Thanks. It's been really interesting. Sorry, I had to go off. My son needed some medication.
Thank you, Carol.
Thanks.
And yeah, I think what you just said there kind of sums up a lot of what we've heard over the past hour. The key message, and Hilda mentioned this and Kim mentioned it, and you've just summarised it as well there. It's about listening to members, talking to them, finding out what their experiences are, what their issues are, their needs, and bringing them with you throughout the campaign. And you've I think demonstrated that really well with the example of deaf colleagues or colleagues who have a hearing impairment, with the examples that you use there around BSL, or how that can relate to other interpreting as well. So we've sped through 60 minutes. I think the time has flown because we've all learned so much. And I think, the examples that we've shared and that you've talked about through your experience in the workplace, Hilda and Kim, are like really insightful and practical. And hopefully all of you who've tuned in to listen and to learn can take some of those away and apply them in your workplaces and in your organising. I know that the London East and South East region of the TUC organise a series of these webinars. It's not normally me who's hosting. I've just joined the team for today, but they will be in touch with you with more information about the campaign soon, a link to the recording, and any resources that may be useful and that can be shared. So for now, have a good rest of the day. Thank you to all of you for tuning in, to Kim and to Hilda and to Jane, who's been in the background helping with some of the tech. So thank you all, and bye-bye for now.